Welcome to Navigating Advocacy, the true crime podcast that goes beyond storytelling to ignite change and seek justice. I'm Melissa.
And I'm Whitney. As true crime enthusiasts turned passionate advocates, we've seen the power of storytelling raise awareness about unsolved crimes and bring hope to victims and their families. We hope to inspire action and promote positive change within the true crime community.
Our mission is simple. We provide a platform for victims and their families to share their stories, to be heard, and find solidarity. But we don't stop there. We offer practical guidance to our listeners on how they can actively make a difference in their own communities.
In each episode, we'll discuss a different unsolved case. We'll examine the details, highlight potential leads, and strive to spark new interests that may help advance the investigation. Our goal is to reignite hope and ultimately bring justice where it's long overdue.
But this podcast is about more than just a conversation. It's about building a community of like-minded individuals who share a common purpose, making a real difference in the fight for justice. Whether you're a seasoned true crime fan or new to the genre, we invite you to join us on this journey of discovery and advocacy.
Together, we can create a wave of change. We're here to empower you to also become advocates for change, no matter where or who you are. We are Navigating Advocacy.
We discuss topics that may be sensitive to listeners. Discretion is advised. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. We have decided to bring back announcements.
Yes, and I love that we're bringing back Happy Monday. It makes me get into the spirit of recording.
It really does. We promise we won't make them 10, 15, 20-minute long. They'll be quick and concise. This week, all we really have is to remind you that this is the last week you can get tickets to True Crime and Paranormal Podcast Festival.
Yes, in Austin, Texas this year. So if you're looking for tickets, use the code Cabernet. I know that's not our name anymore. However, these codes were decided pre-rebrand. So use that code, get a little bit discount off, and support us all at the same time.
Yep, we will be there live and in person. We will be on stage with the family of Jason Landry, who is still missing, almost at 3 years now that Jason is missing. So we are sharing the stage with them so they can share Jason's story with you guys.
Yeah, look forward to seeing you guys there.
When someone mentions Utah, one of two pictures flash through my mind: the delicate arch of Moab's Arches National Park and the mountain-lined skyline of Salt Lake City. A small suburb sits just 25 miles south of Salt Lake and shares that same rocky backdrop. This week, we are navigating advocacy in Harriman, Utah. Harriman was considered a fourth-class town before the year 2000 when it was incorporated. I had not heard of a fourth-class city before, but it's when there's less than 10,000 people residing there. Good thing to know, because my entire life I grew up in apparently a fourth-class city because my hometown only has 5,000 people in it. Since 2000, Harriman has had a population boom, reporting in over 55,000 residents in the 2020 census. There is a replica of the house from Disney's Up there in Harriman that a family actually lives in.
That is one of our favorite movies, even though it is extremely sad. Love the movie Up. And then that's a drastic change in population, if you ask me. That's awesome that it's growing, but wow, that's a lot of people to move in. The roadways, I'm sure, are not prepared for that many people.
No, I do not believe the infrastructure was created within just one decade. There's no way. Usually, where more people live, the higher the crime. Harriman defies this trend, establishing itself as a haven of safety, surpassing 49% of comparable municipalities. The probability of falling prey to a violent crime stands at an impressive 1 in 1,323 individuals.
Well, holy moly, I am excited. We finally got a town that wasn't the worst of the worst in that bottom part of the statistics. So that's great. Great job.
This marks a 45% dip below the national average. There have been 0 reported homicides in Harriman in the last year, according to neighborhoodscout.com. Unfortunately, that was not the case in 1994. Kimberly Arbon was by definition a girly girl. She loved to shop, she had beautiful dark hair, and would talk to her sister Kelly on the phone for hours about what talk shows they watched or what they were going to make for lunch. Kimberly and Kelly were best friends. Kimberly married the love of her life, Mark Evans, in 1991, and the two settled down in Sandy, Utah. Sandy is 15 miles east of Harriman. They built a life together and had 2 children, 1 daughter and 1 son. By all accounts, Kimberly was thriving. She loved being a mom, traveling with her family, and being outdoors. September of 1993 changed the family's world forever when her 2-year-old daughter died after having an allergic reaction to an aspirin. Her death triggered depression in Kimberly. According to the National Library of Medicine, unexpected death of a loved one is common and associated with subsequent elevations in symptoms of multiple forms of psychopathy. Unexpected death is the most common traumatic experience to see the onset of common anxiety, mood, and substance disorders. Medical professionals have observed major depressive episodes, panic disorders, and post-traumatic stress disorder increase after a person experiences an unexpected death of a loved one. In 1994, treatments for depression weren't as widely available as they are today. The stigma surrounding therapy and seeking help for depression weren't really as sought after. The use of antidepressants did dramatically increase in the 1990s, but not quite as much as it did in the 2000s. Kimberly sought other ways to help her cope with depression. She attended a grief support group, spoke with other parents who had experienced the same pain, but she also began self-medicating with cocaine. Kimberly's mother knew she was struggling with this being her coping mechanism and had spoken with Kimberly about how she was trying to step away from the drug. On her daughter's birthday in November of 1993, Kimberly had been doing well. She hosted a small party celebrating, had a Barney the Purple Dinosaur cake, and released balloons at her gravesite. Kelly said that Kimberly stood and watched the balloons until they were completely out of sight. She also shared that Kimberly had purchased a specific candle that she would only light on special occasions to honor her daughter. Kelly said she had noticed an uptick in Kimberly's mood and had a fun family Christmas that year. It seemed as if the counseling and bereavement groups were helping.
Yeah, it seems like she's taking all the steps that she possibly can to come to terms with her daughter's death. She's doing everything. She's seeking help medically, but also getting therapy and doing those grief counseling, which is amazing.
January 15th, 1994 was a brisk winter day. The high reached 47 degrees and the wind was blowing 14 miles an hour. Kelly called in for her daily chat to Kimberly, but was told she wasn't home and that she had gone to see a friend. Kelly didn't know that she would never again have that daily call with her sister. Butterfield Canyon is a well-known area that has many hikers, dog walkers, and joggers frequent just outside of Harriman. Large herds of deer roam the mountainside, and people have reported finding fossils, including coral, in the canyon.
Exciting.
A hunter green Jeep Cherokee was reported to authorities as a possible suicide parked in front of the locked Kennecott Gate entrance to the canyon. A woman with multiple gunshot wounds was slumped over in the front seat. When authorities arrived around 4:30 p.m., they discovered that Kimberly Evans had been shot 6 times, and a struggle seemed evident. School has started, and do you know what that means? That fall is just around the corner. As a mom, I feel like we are constantly saying things slow down next week, and they never do. That is why I love having HelloFresh. They help plan ahead with tasty dishes delivered straight to my door. You simply choose your recipes, pick your delivery date, sit back, and enjoy knowing that dinner is covered.
I know that I have places to be and research to work on. One thing I don't have time for, standing in checkout lines. I leave the meal planning and grocery shopping to HelloFresh. With pre portioned ingredients and easy step by step recipes delivered to my door, saving me so much time and cutting out all of the hassle.
I personally love that I get to try new recipes that I wouldn't normally try on my own, and my kids will eat it. If I were to try a new recipe without it being HelloFresh, they would look at me like I'm an alien and would beg for chicken nuggets.
So go to HelloFresh.com/50 Cabernet and use code 50 Cabernet for 50% off plus free shipping.
That's HelloFresh.com/50 Cabernet and use the code 50 Cabernet for 50% off plus free shipping for America's #1 meal kit. No weapon was found at the scene. Early investigations yielded few results. They put out a call to action from the public. After all, Kimberly's vehicle was found off of a busy road in broad daylight. Sheriff's spokesman Rod Norton noted that there was a vehicle passing every 1 to 2 minutes when they were out there investigating. They asked for anyone to call in if they were in the area between noon and 5 p.m. The Bingham Canyon Mine is located just off the Kennecott Access Road. The possibility that a mine worker traveling to or from a shift could narrow the window of arrival for Kimberly. Or perhaps they saw or heard something. As with most investigations, law enforcement reaches out to family and begins piecing together any information they can muster. They called Mark in for an interview and seemed to have grilled him pretty hard based on the articles I read. All initial evidence led law enforcement to believe that Kimberly had planned on meeting someone there at Butterfield Canyon. That same weekend that Kimberly was murdered, there was a surprising uptick in deaths when you surveyed the greater Salt Lake City area. Salt Lake City's crime statistics are a stark contrast to Harriman. On Neighborhood Scout, Salt Lake City's total crime index states that they are safer than 0% of U.S. neighborhoods. Yes, they sit at a 0.
Well, I have multiple things. Wow, that's crazy. I would think Salt Lake, and I believe we've researched towns outside of Salt Lake, so maybe not Salt Lake specifically, but I would assume it was one of the safer, larger cities in America. However, I would be wrong. Second of all, why did they think she was meeting someone? What led them to believe that she was meeting someone there?
There is very, very little about this case available to the public. It could possibly be that all of the evidence is just there in that one spot. Everything that I read said she was in the front seat. It did not say driver's seat. So could someone have driven her there? Possibly. I'm not sure.
That's really interesting that they specifically just said the front seat and didn't say driver's seat. She was behind the wheel. Why? Okay, sorry. One last question. Why did they think that it was a suicide before? Was that just people passing by? Was like, oh, it could be a suicide?
The passerbys just noticed that there was a woman with gunshot wounds. I don't think that they assessed the situation. No one else was around. So that's just how they reported it. But that was the phone call that law enforcement received.
Yeah, exactly. If you just find a body or remains, you're not going to come up with your own hypothesis on what happened without knowing any information. So very weird but that was just a random passerby that had nobody to do with anything with her that could be possibly covering up for something. Correct?
Correct. In every report I read throughout this whole research process, the only thing they stated was the passersby So to me, it makes me feel like someone was out maybe walking their dog or just going on a hike when they found the vehicle. Your chance of becoming a victim of a violent crime in Salt Lake City is 1 in 100. Property crimes are even worse at 1 in 14. I'm just absolutely stunned at the crime statistics.
Same. That means you or someone on your block every single time is up for a crime against your property.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy. I'm just shocked. A lot of these places don't shock me, but this place definitely shocked me.
Maybe because when I think of Salt Lake City, I think of the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City and of all of the ski resorts, and it's a major touristy town.
Yeah, exactly.
By Monday, January 17th of 1994, 5 people had died in the greater Salt Lake area. Kimberly, as well as an 18-year-old Jeremy Gayton. He was stabbed 5 times, allegedly by a 14-year-old rival gang member. 24-year-old Danny Gibson was shot when he kicked in the front door of an apartment of a man he had ongoing conflicts with. And 2 women were killed by a drunk driver as they walked across the street. Clearly, there aren't any connections between these crimes outside of the dates that they occurred in the same weekend, but it goes to show that it was a busy weekend for crime. A search warrant was executed on a known drug dealer that had a connection to Kimberly. There were some lead particles that could be linked to gunshot residue found on him not long after the murder. One article reported that this person also may have been in possession of nude photos of Kimberly. I couldn't corroborate this information, but could see how it could be used as leverage for something.
Yeah, that would be, in my mind, like the smoking gun. If you have nude photos of the victim, that would at least link them. And then now we have the gunshot residue. Like that's definitely a lead to start following at the bare minimum.
And given that she had been self-medicating, was this her personal drug dealer or was this just a known drug dealer? There was a little bit of conflicting information out there. Again, not a lot is out here about Kimberly. This was 1994. I found 2 newspaper articles and only 4 online articles on the anniversaries. Very, very little is out there. By March of 1994, investigators were not any closer to solving Kimberly's murder than day 1. They seemed confident that they were just needing one piece of evidence and started trying to connect other murders or gun-related crimes to Kimberly's case. One man was charged in a murder at a nearby Payless shoe store. He was a former firefighter and EMT named Michael DeCorso. There were some connections between DeCorso and Kimberly, very, very loose connections at that. He lived in the same county at the time of her death, and he owned a few guns that could potentially be the murder weapon. It was enough for detectives to have ballistics testing performed on these guns, hoping to secure more evidence in Kimberly and one other murder victim's case. Unfortunately, the ballistics didn't match to either of those. Detective Todd Park took over Kimberly's case in the early 2000s, and when he has spoken about it, he describes it very vividly. He brings it up regularly, hoping to keep the public interest alive. He has mentioned that he would like to speak to Mark again, but Mark has no interest in meeting with him or doing any form of interview, law enforcement, or media coverage either. The initial interview with law enforcement seems to have done a number on him. Maybe he's worried about implicating himself, or maybe he just doesn't know anything. Detective Park has also been quoted as saying he needs just a little bit more to, quote, put the case over the top, end quote, and that they could make an arrest. He firmly believes that an arrest could happen in Kimberly's case.
I feel like when they say that they know who did it and they have like all this evidence, they just don't have enough for the prosecutor to be like, okay, we can go ahead and take it to a grand jury or we can arrest this person, because we hear that saying a lot. We just need one more piece of evidence. We just need one more witness to come forward. And it's like, okay, do you really, or is that just, but in this one specifically, it seems like they might have it at least narrowed down somewhat.
Or they have it to where they just needed technology, because in 1994, the DNA testing wasn't there. Maybe there was fingerprints on the outside of her car, or maybe they were able to collect DNA and they just haven't had a chance to test that yet. There was no information out there about what kind of evidence that they had. Kimberly's mom is hoping for a resolution to her daughter's murder, but has continued on with her life. She spends time with her grandson and with her other grandkids. Kelly paid tribute to her best friend and named her daughter after Kimberly. I'm asking anyone that may have been in the Harriman, Utah or Butterfield Canyon vicinity in January of 1994 to please contact the Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office. If you also have heard anyone speaking about Kimberly, regardless of how small or insignificant you may feel the information is, please call 801-743-5850. Just by listening to our content, you too are advocating for justice for these families. Thank you for making a difference in their lives as well.
We want to share a few ways you can support us to continue our mission. You can become a Patreon subscriber for as little as $5 per month, or a simple rate and review on your favorite podcast platform helps us get in front of someone who may know something.
We will continue to shed a light on the forgotten victims, untangle the webs of deceit, and examine the eerie coincidences that make these cases so compelling.
We believe that working together can affect change and create a world where victims are heard, justice is served, and communities are empowered to make a difference, no matter where or who they are.